Barry Clapper.
Here.
Joe Throckmorton. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just a second. Joe Throckmorton.
Here.
Thank you. Flavia Burrell.
Here.
And Cassandra.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I will be muting and unmuting you, so it will take like a couple extra seconds sometimes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. We have approval of minutes from March of this year. I will entertain a motion.
I move approval of the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I need to correct that motion so it's correct. Sorry. Can I go again?
You may.
Yep.
I move approval of the minutes from November 2019 meeting.
I'll second that motion.
It's March 2020.
It's March 2020, I think.
All right, I'm looking at here, so that's why I'm confused.
The
Hold on.
meetings were from,
Look at the
they were
packet.
just from our previous meeting.
I see,
All
yeah.
right, let me do it again. I move approval of the minutes from March 2019 meeting.
2020 meeting.
2020, thank you. Geesh, that's 3 times, 2020.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
Do I hear a
move approval
second?
of the March 2020 BZA meeting minutes.
Second, please.
I will still second that motion.
Thank you. We will now have a vote.
Great, thank you. Flavia Burrell,
Yes.
Cassandra Husky,
Yes.
Barry Clapper,
Yes.
and Joe Throckmorton.
Yes.
Okay.
Great,
Thank you. Okay, reports, resolutions, and communications. Obviously, this evening we are live via Zoom. And if there is an opportunity to speak and you wish to speak, you will need to go to the bottom bar and click on participants. And there will be a window on the right side of the screen where at the very bottom right corner, you can click raise hand, and that will alert Jackie that you wish to speak. So that's how we're going to do this. It'll take a little bit more time than usual, just for the logistics, but that is how we know that someone on the board or from the public is prepared to speak at a certain time. Okay. Anything further, Jackie?
No, that's all we have today.
Okay. So this evening, we have 3 petitions that are continued to May 21st, 2020. They are AA-41-19, Judy Baker and David Holdman, V-44-19, Randall McLaughlin, and AA-08-20, the Annex Group. This evening, we have 2 petitions on our agenda. The first one is UV-03-20, Bobby Staggs. And then we have UV/V-09-20, the Bloomington Housing Authority. We are ready for the first petition. Staff report, please.
Great, and so Keegan will give that. You there, Keegan?
Yes. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, Keegan, can you hold on just a second?
Yes.
Sorry, Joe, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I've pulled up. All right, I'm sorry. I had the wrong packet in front of me. That's why I had all that wrong information, Barry. So I
Okay.
just needed a second to find that. I now have it in front of me, so thank you.
Great.
Great, go ahead, Keegan.
All right. Awesome. So yeah, this is the request for a use variance for the property at 1414 West Arlington Road. You'll see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's this red box here just north of the roundabout on 17th Street. Here's a closer look at the property. It's approximately 2.57 acres in size. It's currently zoned residential single family. The comp plan designates this area neighborhood residential. Its current land use is multifamily, and you'll notice they have the 3 units on the single parcel. So that would make it multifamily, and their proposed land use would be expanding the multifamily. The surrounding uses, single family to the north and west, multifamily to the east, and to the south, single family and multifamily. So like I said, the petitioner is requesting a use variance to allow for the expansion of a multifamily use in the residential single family zoning district. Here is their site plan that they submitted to us. You'll notice the attached garage down here is what they're proposing will be connected to this single family residence through an addition. It's approximately 32 by 52 feet in size. It would be for the stated purpose of storing vehicles as well as personal equipment, such as like lawnmowers. A backhoe was mentioned at the Plan Commission meeting last week, and then as well as personal belongings and equipment. So it would be for both parking and storage. Here's some pictures of the petitioner submitted to us for the site, and the petitioner can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe this area over here is where the addition would be located, where these vehicles are. This picture to the right is towards the rear of the property. There's a couple more pictures here showing one of their parking areas by the house up there. And this is their entrance on the right side. And this is a closer picture of one of their parking areas where I believe the addition would be located at. The Planning Commission reviewed this use variance request at their April 13th meeting, and they voted 6-2 to forward the use variance request to the Board of Zoning Appeals with a recommendation for denial. And I'll get into that more here in a sec, but we found that it was not in line with the proposal was not in line with the goals of the comprehensive plan. So the UDO provides guidance for developing non-conforming sites and uses. And so this site at one time was probably, definitely allowed to have 3 units on one parcel, and it was permitted, but as the zoning changed, this was a use that was rendered non-conforming, and so the UDO provides guidance, and it will be guided. It will be subject to the provisions under Chapter 20.08, and then under Chapter 20.08, there is the changes in use restricted, which basically says that a lawful non-conforming use should not be intensified, expanded, enlarged, extended, or relocated to another portion of the lot or another part of the structure. And that's what we saw was happening here in this proposal, is that by adding the addition to that house, they would be expanding a non-conforming use, which is prohibited by the UDO. It also goes on to say that no building or structure shall be constructed in connection with an existing lawful non-conforming use. And for clarity, the UDO defines enlargement as expansion of any use or structure into or onto another portion of a structure or lot not previously occupied by said use or structure, or increase in any physical dimension of a structure, which is what is happening here. So in addition to the need for the use variance, if they get the use variance, they would also have to meet limited compliance with the code. Because this is a non-conforming site, their proposal would trigger limited compliance. So they would have to pave any substandard parking spaces, stripe those parking spaces, add a 5-foot sidewalk along West Arlington Road, as well as create a landscape plan for their site, which would be based on the number of parking spaces. They would work with us to create a landscape plan. And so, yeah, this would be required in addition to the use variance if that is granted today. So for the criteria for and findings for the use variance, for the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. No injury to the public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the community is found. The use of the property would remain as multifamily, and although it would be expanded, the addition would be located substantially far away from the public right-of-way, or adjacent properties. For number 2, the use variance and value of, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantial manner. We did find that there would be adverse impacts to the use and value of the adjacent area. The proposed addition is pretty substantial in size for a traditional single-family accessory structure or garage, and the use would be for the stated purpose of parking and storage, which would be the storage aspect is more of what is out of character for a traditional single-family neighborhood residential area. So we did find that there would be adverse impacts to the use and value of the area. For the number 3, the need of the variance arises from some condition peculiar to the property. There was no peculiar conditions found that would require the need for a use variance. The property is considered to be lawful non-conforming and can exist as such in perpetuity. Things like regular maintenance and upkeep are permitted with lawful non-conforming uses and sites, but expansion of those uses and sites is prohibited by the UDO. And just being a non-conforming use or site is not considered to be unique in and of itself. For a strict application of the terms of the UDO will constitute an unnecessary hardship if applied to the property. Strict application of the UDO would not constitute an unnecessary hardship because as a non-conforming use, the property is permitted to exist as it is in perpetuity. And of course, regular maintenance and similar activity is permitted, but expanding a non-conforming use is explicitly prohibited by the UDO. And for the final one, does this proposal interfere substantially with the comprehensive plan? Staff did find that this proposal would interfere with the intents of the neighborhood residential district and the comprehensive plan. For guidance on land use in the neighborhood residential district, the comprehensive plan states that new and redevelopment activity in this district is mostly limited to remodeling existing or constructing new single-family residences. This petition involves the expansion of a multifamily use, which we found would be in conflict with that. It also goes on to state that for larger tracts of land, single-family attached multifamily uses may be appropriate. And while this is a multifamily use and is allowed to exist as it is in perpetuity, expanding that multifamily use we found would be in conflict with the intents of the neighborhood residential district. So in conclusion, staff did find that this proposal does interfere with the intents of the comprehensive plan and the UDO. This site is a lawful non-conforming use and is allowed to exist as such in perpetuity, but expanding it would be prohibited by the UDO. So the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopts the proposed findings and denies UV-03-20. And I can take any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Keegan. Petitioner's representative, are they with us?
Yes,
Yes. Could you please state your name?
my name is Jackie Staggs.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Okay. I guess from the other day that, they recommended that they were going to try and get it denied. And what I want to, if I can speak, I'm going to kind of tell you some things I wrote down. We have also had, let me get this straight. This is a single family, area, but we also have, I don't know if they've told you, we have apartment complex being built right behind us with 150 apartments. It showed in the back on one of the pictures that we showed you that had some orange tape. Right to the right of that, on our other side, we have another apartment complex that's been there for 10 years. And both of these are right up against us. And at the time, I'm not for sure if those are multifamily or if it's business or commercial or what, but from all I understand this, we were in, everything was right before, I guess they changed the zoning ordinance, and now they're saying with the variance that we're not in compliance. We have had so many problems. First of all, the main thing I want to tell you is I have health problems. That's why we want to build the pole barn. It's needed for it to put his backhoe in and everything, but I have had bypass surgery. I have had both my carotids done. I have 3-stage kidney disease, and I've had a total knee replacement, and I cannot get around and walk across the yard. If you could see by one picture where the things are placed. For the winter, I need something where I could go inside and get in the car and not have to clean it off. I'm 74 years old, and I'm having a lot of problems with this now. My husband is a Vietnam veteran. He has 100% disability, and he's 100% disabled. He has PTSD. He was in the Vietnam War and did 2 tours. He has had a lot of problems with being around people, and we've had a lot of problems with this property by people coming into our property from this apartments next door, and they would all get drunk, and then when they would call the police, they would run over our fence and come and hide in our backyard. And that was very scary to us. These kind of things are what has made us very nervous, and we want to be able to put our property inside the barn because we've had our car stolen twice. We've had a canoe taken, how we don't know, out of our yard. We've had the 4Runner stolen, and that was part of the problem. We want something where we can lock it up and save what we have. But the main problem is our health. And like I say, my husband doesn't do well. He stays at home. And if you can see from some of the pictures, he had put piers in our front yard. He's done a lot of work on this property to make it look nice, so we're not a detriment to anybody that lives next door to us or comes by. We've tried to do everything we can, and we've lived here 40 years. And I really need, they're saying the pole barn is too big, but because we have so many cars and trucks and things, we need something big enough to be able to put things in it. Now, I don't know if you can understand everything that I've said, but if there's any questions that you'd like to ask me, I'll do all I can to answer them.
Thank you. Okay, so we are to the board for questions for staff or for petitioner. How do I change?
Sorry, Joe, you can go ahead.
Okay. You kept putting my hand down, I thought.
I know, I'm so sorry.
All right. So this would be to the city, and it's a question about procedure. Am I allowed to ask what the general sense of the planning board was when they forwarded it to us 6-2? They forwarded it to us with a recommendation for denial. Are we allowed to hear some of the rationale for that, or is that off limits?
I'm not sure. Let's ask Mr. Rooker. Mike, can you weigh in?
Yeah, I can. Of course you can. Yeah, that was a public meeting. If you want to, absolutely. There's no reason.
Are you able then to provide me just a nutshell of kind of why they would? That seems overwhelming, 6-2. So I'd like to know just a nutshell as to what that argument was as to deny this.
So I'm going to jump in here real quick.
Do you want to? Oh, go ahead.
Before you do, Jackie, just to say it's a little bit difficult. I think it's fine to talk about some of the things that the individual plan commission members talked about, but do keep in mind that, they each vote as individuals. So it's a little bit difficult to characterize board or commission intent generally when we're trying to make sense of their individual rationales for voting.
Completely understand. Thank you.
Okay, Keegan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. And, if I miss anything, feel free to add on. But, generally I took their, the general sentiment was, they agreed that this was in conflict with the, goals and intents of the comprehensive plan, and also the fact that the UDO, very clearly states that, expanding a non-conforming use or site is not permitted. And I think both of those things, constituted why they voted 6-2. But, Jackie, I don't know if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, so they, when they're looking at it, they're not looking at the same findings you are. They're only looking at whether or not the request is in line with the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan here is neighborhood residential, which is largely single family with some pockets of multifamily or small commercial, but the wide majority of neighborhood residential is going to be single family, and this particular area of Arlington is not what I would describe as an area that would be identified as ideal for multifamily, and so they focused on that, which is good. I mean, that is what they're supposed to be focusing on. They are not to be looking at the wider things that you do.
And Jackie, this piece of property with the 3 living units on it, that's not possible to subdivide. I'm just curious about that.
Right. So no, I don't believe so. So they have enough land for all 3, but I don't believe they have enough frontage to make sense, because there's that 3rd house in the back that wouldn't be able to be on a lot that had frontage on Arlington. And we discussed this a little bit at Planning Commission, but I don't believe they would be allowed to do a subdivision where then one of the lots would end up with 2 houses, because even though it is non-conforming right now, then we would be potentially legitimizing that non-conformity by letting them do a subdivision where a lot ends up being non-conforming. But I'm not positive on that. But yes, I think a subdivision would be quite difficult. I think it would be impossible.
Would a traditionally sized garage, and I'm going to say that very generally, a traditionally sized garage, let's say a standard 2-car garage being added to this house, would that be conforming or non-conforming?
It would be non-conforming. So any expansion of the multifamily use is not allowed.
Okay. But that was not found, the inability to build any kind of garage was not found to be an unusual, a peculiar hardship.
No, we didn't. No, we did not, because if they wanted to develop this lot as a single family lot, they could. Would they have to tear down 2 houses to do it? Yes, they would. So it's incredibly unlikely they would do that. But they have a use there that's non-conforming. It's been said a couple of times that, oh, these houses were built in compliance with code, but this has always been single family. So whether or not that slipped through the cracks, or, we can't go back and look up building permits that far back. I believe one of the houses is pre-zoning and the other 2 are not. I don't, that's something we weren't able to pin down exactly. But I mean, under current code, it is multifamily because it's 3 units on 1 lot, and because of that, it can go on in the state that it's in perpetuity, like any other lawful non-conforming, but it just cannot be expanded. And no, we did not identify that. Lots of multifamily uses don't have garages.
And to be clear, the building that's closest to Arlington is an apartment complex with 2 units. Is that correct?
I would have to clarify with the petitioners. I'm pretty sure they told us it is not. But Jackie, the house closest to the road, are there 2 units in there or 1?
There's 1. My daughter and granddaughter live in it.
Okay,
Right.
so there.
One time that was my beauty shop years back.
Okay, so each one of
Great,
those buildings really is housing a single family unit.
Yep, just like an apartment complex with 4 units would be housing 4 families. It's because it's on 1 lot, we see it as 1 use.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this question. This goes again to anyone at the city. You're saying that that in its current configuration as legal non-conforming, there is no type of structure that can be built within code in order for them to park their vehicles in it.
Correct.
That's correct. So that could be, if we chose, that could be seen as a peculiar circumstance. Is that fair?
If you think so, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's, I'll stop for now.
Great. Do any of the other board members have questions? If so, can you press your little hand thing, or I can just unmute you. Oh, I see Barry. Hold on. Okay, Barry.
I'm unmuted. So could you speak a little bit to the surrounding uses? And I see here there's Pine Grove Village. That is a multifamily development. There's ongoing development behind to the east. Is that what the petition is referring to?
Yep. Keegan, do you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll pull up their picture they sent, I believe. Yeah. I think they were referring to this picture here. I'm not sure if that's Pine Grove Village, but yeah, sorry, does that answer your question, or I'm not sure if that was.
So
Yeah,
I guess,
so Barry-
is there another, I'm sorry, I just wanted to understand. I know that there is a parcel of land behind Pine Grove Village, a large parcel that I thought was set for development at some point. I didn't know if that was what the petitioner is referring
Yes.
to.
That is what they're talking about. So there is immediately to the east of the petition site, there is a large parcel that is currently being developed as a large multifamily project. It's called Nile Ridge. So that's been under construction for a year or so.
Okay.
And then yes, Pine Grove Village is immediately to the south. Both of those properties derive access, Pine Grove Village specifically, direct access from 17th to the south, as opposed to Arlington to the west.
Okay, okay. And do you have knowledge of the petitioner cited that they've had a number of issues with some of the adjacent residents, and I don't know if there are police reports, if all that has been documented. Is that acknowledged ongoing problem?
Let's see. I'll see what Jackie has to say. I don't know if they've reported that to anyone. We only know from what they have told us during this process. Jackie, do you have an answer to that?
Yes, this has been a few years back when they ran through our yard, and no, we did not call the police. They just ran through it and were hiding, and then the police were out there with lights looking for people. But that is right up close to our house, and that is the Pine Village. And both of those, I don't know what you call them, if that's multifamily. But when we moved here, I wanted to say real quick, if I could, we were in compliance because part of our property in front was cited as business and part was residential, and then the city changed the zoning to all residential. And back then, if you had anything that came up against your property that was like business or anything, you could go before the board and get, I believe that's how I got my beauty shop, because we had the Pine Grove Village behind us. That's where the people ran from. And now they're building the new one right up against the backyard, as you could see in that. And that's going to be like 150. Everything is in compliance and has been in compliance regardless. I'm not sure what they're meaning, but we've been in compliance with everything we've done. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Jackie, just following up, so this new development, obviously there'll have to be a buffer, and that could potentially include a fence and other privacy measures.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Because even though this is still, it's a different zone, obviously, it's RS up against RM, even though it has this grandfathered use.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So, and I mean, I think everyone already knows this, and I think Keegan did a good job of explaining it, going through the findings. But I mean, the idea here for us is that, one of the findings, you would have to find that there's an unnecessary hardship that they are being put put under, and they're already using the property much more intensely than any of the neighbors are allowed to use their properties. I don't know if I missed it. If Keegan said we've had one neighbor come in before we closed down to speak against, to say that they didn't think that a variance should be granted for further intensification of this property because it already is above kind of what the rest of the neighborhood is allowed to do. And what they have there now, of course, can continue on, but we did not feel like that the legal non-conforming status was creating a hardship for them in the use of the property. I think Joe has a question here. Hold on just a second.
Well, I don't
Okay, Joe.
want to take away from Barry. Just very quickly, I wanted you to explain that a little more when you say that they're using this property much more than those around them. What does that mean specifically?
Well, they have 3 homes on it, and each property is allowed to have 1.
Each property, right? So they have more density, and they're being used as living units. But I want to make sure I'm clear. It sounded as if you were implying that there was still business going on there.
Oh, no, I wasn't, but actually, yes, and they may be able to speak to that more. I do think that they do run a business. I don't know, I mean, just in general, I believe that they have a business. I don't know if it's run from this location. They may be able to speak to that more. So let me see if Jackie can for just a second.
And then Barry, feedback to you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I didn't know what that meant.
Okay, I think that
Sure,
you might
sorry,
think,
go ahead, Jackie.
I think that you might think that there was a business because we had a sign in our front years ago that said Staggs Construction, and they're doing daycare. Those are still there. They've never been taken down. But no, we're 74, and my husband is on disability, and I am on Social Security. We don't do anything, and our kids work out. My son lives in the house behind us with his wife, and my daughter and granddaughter lives in the one before. Up front. We don't have any kind of business, so I just want to make that clear. Those are just old signs.
So the backhoe is just
Great, thank you.
personal use then?
Yes, my husband got it from someone real cheap, and he absolutely loves it, even though, he does work around home. He can, let me just state this I will say it in the end. I want to read a letter, but yes, he uses it just around, it's almost 3 acres, so he has done different things with it, trying to clear the yard and getting trees out and all that kind of thing to improve it.
Great, thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Here's Flavia, just a second. Okay, Flavia, go ahead.
Hi, of course, I was in the meeting at the Plan Commission when we went through this. If you read at the specs of this building, you will notice that this is Mrs. Staggs said it correctly, it is a pole barn. It's not your traditional garage. It's metal siding, corrugated metal, charcoal color. It's 52 feet long and 32 feet wide. So once this is built, it's going to be a quite massive structure. It's going to be a pretty massive structure, probably bigger than the house. In the plans we have, it shows in scale smaller than the house, but I think it's the opposite. It's going to look bigger than the house. My question is this a commercial space? Is this going to be used for a commercial space?
Okay, Jackie, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I was asked this before, and absolutely not as a commercial space. We would sign an affidavit or whatever is needed. It's just that it started out as a pole barn. I don't know where we got it different, but it's because we have the backhoe that we want to park in there, and because we have no place else to put, you know, lawnmowers, everything that we have, they're laying out in the yard. If you look at the picture, you can see the pole barn is not as big as the house. It's 32 by 52. It may look taller, but it is not bigger. And yeah, the four-car, you can see like the four-car garage in the picture, and she says it looks like it's bigger than the house, but it absolutely isn't. We've always wanted a pole barn. That's why we tried to go with it instead of garage. That's just, you know, I feel guilty because we were asking for a pole barn instead of a garage, and it's only meant for storage and our health. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, Cassandra, go ahead.
Hey, yeah. Just for what it's worth, it sounds like it doesn't matter whether it's a pole barn or a garage or how big it is. It's still got the same problem for us. I was trying to pull this up on my own. I apologize, I couldn't. Is there a map showing the residential neighborhood area in the comprehensive plan, like an overlay that we could see with this property?
I don't have
That's
that.
a good question. I don't think there was in there.
It's not in.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jackie.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
But you know, that is something that we could. It's not included in the staff report or in this presentation, but I mean that is something that we could provide. If,
Okay, I just tried.
Yeah, I can pull one up.
Comprehensive plan here, but I'm not seeing where there are overlay maps.
Just a second. Let me see if I can unshare Keegan.
Oh, sure. I can stop my.
Hold on.
And I also just want to clarify, there's absolutely nothing that can be added to this property that wouldn't be considered an expansion of multifamily use.
Correct.
Right, enlargement of any structure that's being used, that's being used toward that use is not allowed. Can you see this
Oh yeah.
map? Okay, great. I should make sure. So the yellow is single family. So this is, I think you can probably see my cursor. This is the, this is the property here. And then, you know, the comprehensive plan does acknowledge that there will be some areas in this residential neighborhood, the neighborhood residential, that would be for multifamily. And so this is where we're talking about where Nile Ridge is being built. They derive access from 17th Street to the south. So that it's kind of like an expansion of this kind of commercial multifamily to the back of those two properties. And the comprehensive plan does call for that as well. It says, yes, we have created lines, but they're supposed to be fuzzy. And if it makes sense, you should, you know, extend these lines to allow for a little bit of freedom or leeway if it makes sense for example, where it's single family against commercial multifamily, if that needs to be expanded. But as you can see here, it's just entirely surrounded. The idea would be that this would be single family, and Arlington Road is obviously a much different road in this area than 17th Street is to the south.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Despite the fact that right now there's kind of a mix of zoning in that area, the idea through the comprehensive plan is that we would move toward it all being essentially single family residential with pockets.
Probably so I think what's going to end up happening, yes, that is the idea, but the caveat was it left in that that there are spaces for some multifamily. So existing multifamily is not going to be rezoned to single family, or, you know, like an existing mobile home park isn't going to be changed. And that's why the kind of guidance was left in that you have to make reasonable accommodation for some of these uses, but for areas that are low density and single family, that should stay the same.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just a sec here. Sorry, guys. It's not letting me. Okay, Joe, you want to go ahead?
I just want to make sure, because I'm not seeing a picture of the home. I do want to verify that 1414 and a half has no garage whatsoever.
That is correct. Keegan, right, there are no garages on this property.
Thank you.
Yes, correct.
Yes, okay.
On the entire property, there's not any on
Correct.
1414, and there's not any at the other 1414.
Correct.
And I will say that it does look like there are like accessory structures, like in one of the pictures you can see a shed, but it does not look like there are any garages or parking structures like that on the site.
Okay.
Oh, Barry, did you have something?
I did. Jackie, could you please tell us, or Keegan tell us, what are the general provisions for an accessory structure for residential?
Yes, Keegan, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So in general, for their zoning district, if they just did a detached accessory structure, I believe the maximum size for that would be 580 square feet. And that's cumulative for all accessory structures on the site, would be 580 square feet. The setbacks, I don't think would be a problem here. I think it's like 5 from the side and rear and 10 from the front, but, anyways. But if they did this as a detached structure, it would be far too big for the residential single family zoning district, which when they first submitted the permit, it was a detached structure. We told them it was too big, and it was resubmitted attached, but we still had the issue of the non-conforming use and the triggers that go along with that.
Right. So actually, in this district, so it's actually 840 here. So it is a little bit bigger, but it's still much the allowable maximum for all accessory structures is still much lower than what they would have on the property. But then so they did then change the pole barn request by adding basically a breezeway between the new structure and the house.
Okay, and making it an addition, essentially.
Basically, yes. And they're, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Do any of the other board members have questions? I'm trying to unmute you, Flavia, but it's not working. Hold on. Oh, there you go, Flavia.
A couple of questions. One is, I see when I look on the map and all the different homes around them, a lot of the homes have yard, barns or some sort of storage units that they have in their yards. Is that allowed for them to store tools or the backhoe or anything, or lawnmower for that matter?
Yes. So yes, they can have an accessory structure. They can have any number of accessory structures as long as they don't go over the maximum of the 840 square feet. Or they can have 2, but they have to be a maximum of 840 or less. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes. So the pole barn, the current pole barn is 1,664 square feet, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the current submission.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so, yes. It's quite large.
Okay.
Is that everything for you, Flavia? Okay.
Yes, at this point, thank you.
Great. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so now I'm confused. I thought it was just stated, I'm not sure who said it, someone from the city, that it originally was presented as a pole barn, but it was too big. But you're saying that they could actually build a pole barn, or they could build an accessory structure and it would still be acceptable within code if it's smaller.
No, sorry. So she was asking about the surrounding properties. So the surrounding properties can have accessory. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
I wanted to make sure I understood that this property, as it currently is, doesn't have an allowance any longer that would allow them to build a separate structure of any size, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I did understand it. I'm sorry. Thank you for that question, Flavia,
Yeah,
because it
no
helped
problem.
explain that to me.
Okay, Flavia.
Yes, my other question is, so when I look on the GIS, it shows, several owners. So this property, in terms of real estate taxes, so you have three single residences in one property paying one property tax?
Jackie, do you want to answer that question?
We pay on each house. There are 3 houses and we pay property tax on all 3. It's not just one. The land is one, but the houses are 3 different property taxes that we pay.
So you pay on the 3 different structures. I'm just trying to understand, so,
Yes, ma'am.
yes.
Thank you, Jackie. Anything else from the board members?
Okay. If we're done for the moment with the board, is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this petition? Please hit the little raise your hand sign if there is somebody here from the public who would like to speak to this petition.
Doesn't look like it, Barry, and we don't have anybody on Facebook either.
Okay, so then we are back to the petitioner for final comments. I'm sure you have plenty of time remaining. If there is something further you'd like to add at this point.
I would, and it might not be, I want to explain a little bit to you why we want the safety of the barn as well as for our health. I was telling you my husband was in Vietnam and he's disabled. And I would like to say that he fought for his country, and I would like to tell you something he wrote and wanted to read to you, but he can't and wants me to. While he was on duty one night in Vietnam, 2 jets came in for refueling. The hose busted and caught the plane on fire. I pulled one pilot out of the cockpit who was on fire, and I put sand on him and put him out. The other pilot climbed out on his own and was on fire. He fell to the ground, and I poured sand on him and put him out. They sent both to the Philippines to the hospital, and I heard that they both died. The next day, I was sent to an outpost called Cam Duck. I was on top of a mountain with a Green Beret unit with 6 men, and I was the only Marine. One night, we went out into the jungle on patrol, and all of a sudden, me and one Green Beret came face to face with 2 Viet Cong. He shot one and told me to kill the other. I did. That was my first kill. I still can't get the young man's face out of my mind, and I'm 75 years old. He turned his face away from me when I shot him. God forgive me. I was 17 years old. That was only one of the many bad things that I did while I was there. Now all I want to do is build my wife and me the pole barn to park our trucks and our backhoe and store things. We will sign an affidavit stating that we will never use the pole barn for anything else. I'm not saying that just to get your pity or sympathy. I'm telling you that my husband has a disablement himself, and he stays home for much of the time. He does come out sometimes, but his home is his safe place. And we have saved up and worked to get this. And that's why it was a pole barn, because he thought he could work on things and store them in there, and that would help him. But it would also help me with my disabilities to park. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say, that the neighbor who called in or came in and said we didn't need it, from my understanding, he had no reason. He just said that we didn't need it. Now that's his opinion, but the last thing is, my husband did fight for our country. We have lived here for 40 years. We have built, worked, and I can't understand that the city is being so strict. Even though these things say that you have to have this certain use, there's always a way to, come up with something a little different, especially when we're by ourselves on this one big acreage and we're not hurting anything else. Please forgive me if I'm trying to sound preachy or anything like that, but I've prayed about this. I hope that you'll see it our way. If not, I still, I thank you for your time and listening to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. We are now back to the board for further discussion, questions, or action. I will entertain a motion.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't get my hand raised.
Okay. Mhm.
I did have a comment. So I appreciate what the petitioner has said, concerning the background of of their history together and why he's coming to ask for this. I want to go back to this idea of the peculiar circumstance, because none of the structures have anywhere to park, and that is interesting to me. That is difficult to have any type of home to kind of just have a blanket of you can't build anything. Now, with that said, I think that's peculiar. I think what concerns me is the size of what's being requested. Now, I will tell you that where I'm at right now, before we have a motion, is if this petitioner had come to us with a standard garage that's and by standard I mean one that you would normally find with a residential home, which would be a single car or two car garage, I would find myself being very, very willing to grant a variance. I think what concerns me is not how they're going to use this structure, but it's the size of the structure is just inappropriate for a residential zoning. So that's kind of where I'm, and I'm happy to have anyone on the board kind of talk me one way or the other, but that's what's bothering me. I think it's a peculiar circumstance. I think that I think it's reasonable for us to say, yes, you can build an additional structure, but I find that the structure that's being requested is just, I don't think it's appropriate for this home. So if anyone can help me with that, that would be great.
I agree with Joe. I think that, looking at an accessory structure and, just average storage needs for residential use, the fact that there are three houses and there is no storage or very limited storage. I think that the guidance that the RS zone gives us in terms of limiting the size and scale as what is appropriate, this petition really goes far beyond that. So with this petition, I would agree that I don't think a variance would be appropriate, or that we could.
Barry, I'm very much I'm of the opinion of encouraging strongly the petitioner to reconsider and come forward with something that's a little more appropriate for the home rather than this giant structure. That's where I'm at. I mean, I am much more sympathetic to that. And further, I would also have no problem if each of the other two structures came forward and said, we also wanted to build an attached garage to it as well that was appropriate for that home. I hope that makes sense. I'm more open to granting a variance for that because it's making the home more useful. This looks like, if you take away the petitioner, you take the petitioner out of this and say, this looks like someone who wants to build a large structure and store a bunch of stuff there. It doesn't look like it's something to be used for a home.
Well, it's an agricultural scale building.
Thank you. I was wondering if Flavia or Cassandra had any input on that. I'm not really, I don't know which way to go on this.
I have a question for maybe Jackie here. So this is a lawful non-conforming parcel right now. So let's say we grant this variance and then they sell the house to another owner. What kind of hardships are we gonna impose on the next owner? I mean, what happens here? I'm looking at the property as a whole at this point. The petition as it is right now, it looks like a large commercial structure will be built in this place. And I think eventually it will attract a type of buyer that would like to have a business in this property. I mean, just the way the property is set up. So I understand the Plan Commission's decision because they have to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan and the new UDO. So we have to follow those rules. I tend to agree if this was an accessory, an attached garage, typically 21 by 24, that would be attached to the house and actually help the owners park in the winter and walk into the house with safety. I would be more inclined to agree that a variance would improve this property. It would be an improvement. In terms of having this large structure, I think it will cause problems with the neighbors and the future uses of this property as well. Do you have anything to say there, Jackie? Scanlon?
Sure. Sorry. Yes, I mean, I think those are all things for you all to consider. I mean, for us, we've, for the reasons we've said, don't think that the restriction on expansion of multifamily is creating a hardship for this property, or that there is a peculiar condition about this land that says, yes, we should let you intensify and dig in and make this use that we've decided as a community isn't appropriate here, be able to go on further into the future. But yes, I mean, we can't really speak to future property values or things like that, but I mean, we just don't know future sales or anything like that. But I mean, I see the point that you're making, a very large storage structure, while this property owner is intending to use it for what they consider residential accessory use, could open the property up, make it seem more desirable for more intense uses in the future for future owners. I mean, I think that makes sense. I will say that we've said this before, but just any expansion would still require the variance. I do understand what Mr. Throckmorton is saying about maybe being more friendly to a smaller expansion that would be more typical for single family. But I will say that in a rural setting, a large pole barn of the size that they're asking, so like further out in the county outside of city limits, is not atypical at all. So I do think from their perspective, they're not kind of, my guess would be, seeing it the way that when we're saying, oh, this doesn't seem residential, to them, it is residential because they only live here and want to have their extra things stored there. But we have to see it based on the scale that has been put in place for the city, and accessory structures, though this would not be accessory in this case because it's going to be attached by the breezeway, are limited in size because we are inside city limits and trying to keep the scale of buildings and development to what we would consider a typical urban-ish scale. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. Did I answer your question at all, Flavia? Oh, yep.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I agree. We wouldn't be having this conversation. This wouldn't be a conversation if this was in Monroe County. and not in city limits. If they were out in the county and wanting to do a pole barn in their house, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be presented in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, because
Right.
that would be allowed. So it is an unfortunate that their property, the city caught up with their property, and they are in city limits. So they've been there for 40 years, but City of Bloomington is the jurisdiction over them right now.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Yep. I don't have any other hands, I don't think. Do any of the four of you are actually all unmuted except for Flavia, if you want to say
Actually,
something.
okay, since I'm on, then can I raise my hand?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I'm tending to agree with Joe here. I feel like having some kind of residential garage fixes my concerns about, numbers 2 through 5, the adverse impacts. Also, I do think it is peculiar that the property has 3 single-family residences on it. That in itself is peculiar. That they can't add anything to it to improve it as a residential structure. I think having additional residential garages would improve the property and possibly, not have the issue of adverse impacts on neighboring properties. And also it would discourage, multiple uses of the property by not having a pole barn, and encourage continued single family use. So if that were something that we could do, I would definitely be on board with allowing a variance for some type of garage that would be suited to a single family residence. I'm wondering though about, you mentioned additional things they would have to do then, such as landscaping. I mean, if we were to allow some type of single family residential sized garage there, what additional site changes would they have to make or conform to in order to put that in? Or is that something we would decide ourselves? What would the step look like moving forward if that's the decision we made?
If you do approve.
Mm-hmm.
Keegan, do you have the details on what site plan stuff they'll have to do if they get the approval?
Sure. Yeah, I have it in the staff report and in the presentation, but even if we approved a smaller garage, my understanding is that they would still have to meet the limited compliance criteria in the UDO of like paving parking surfaces, striping, a sidewalk, as well as landscape plan. But let me know if that is accurate. Jack?
Yeah, yes, that sounds right.
But just as a clarification, that is not what we're considering this evening. We are considering the petition before us, which is for this larger structure. And that is
Sure.
what we are voting on.
Well, yeah, to clarify, so what you're considering is a use variance. So do you agree that they meet the findings for a use that is not allowed by code in this area to be expanded? And then I do think, and we can let Mr. Rooker weigh in, I do think that if you find that, yes, you do think that they meet the 5 findings, that you could do conditions on what type of expansion you think that should be.
Okay.
I think that that's probably true. Mike, would that work?
Yeah, I think they could do it that way. They could impose certain conditions. The BZA is allowed to impose conditions as part of an approval like this.
Yeah, so you would not be dictating, unless you put a condition in, you're not dictating what they can do. You're just dictating that they can expand. So I'm guessing, Keegan, can you screen share your conclusions? I'm guessing that just without pulling it up, that there's a condition that you're probably approving for this particular thing. But hold on just a second. Oh no, because we recommended denial. Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Back up here. Sorry. You would be crafting conditions. So if in the conditions you do include limitations, then that would be part of the approval for the use variance. If you do think you are leaning that way, then we will need to talk about it because, for example, metal is not a material that is allowed. So yes,
there's
so
more to it. Yeah.
there are other issues with the design they're requesting, but you're not approving a design, you're approving a use.
But then we would also have to come up with alternative findings.
Yes.
And that would be for number 4, number 3.
Everything except 1.
Number 2, pretty much all of them.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Right.
And I think I was advocating not necessarily to, we've done this in the past with Joe when he was on the board, but I don't necessarily want to go down that road of trying to say, to the petitioner, yeah, we'll grant a variance on these conditions, because I think that's a little too complicated to try to affect here. I think what I'm getting at is if we decide that we're going to deny, and that's the outcome, I personally would want to make sure that the petitioner knows that I personally am encouraging them to sit down with the city again and work out making this look like a residential addition as opposed to a large pole barn, and bring it back to us.
But we're not really approving this project. We're approving the use.
Correct.
So
Right, but they could repetition though, couldn't they? Or do we have to, if they say no?
So so there is a time limit. They would not be able to come back. I believe it's within a year.
I thought so. Okay.
It might be 6 months.
This is Eric Grulich, senior planner. So the 1 year time frame is only for site plans. If a use variance is denied, then it's just denied. They can't come back with the same use variance request again.
Okay. Well, then thank you for that, because it makes a difference for us to give them a stipulation. So
yeah.
So if you are thinking that there is another version of this that, while you're talking about use, you have been also talking about possibly doing restrictive conditions that it would maybe make, sense to continue it if you couldn't come to an agreement
That's what I was going to ask, Jackie. I think that if we are, I guess I would entertain a motion to continue this case, because I think we would need to spend some time crafting the findings and then coming up with the conditions, because there's a little bit more to it than just size. There are other things I think that we'd have to take into consideration that I don't think we're really able to do on the fly. So if there is, if the board is amenable to further consideration, then I think I would entertain a motion for a continuance.
I think Flavia, I'm trying to unmute her. Yep, there you go, Flavia.
Yeah. Thank you.
Might have had a question. Mm-hmm.
No, she just answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, and then also, just for full disclosure, the petitioner is raising her hand. I know it is not time for her to speak.
Right.
I'm just putting it out there.
Thank you. I see that as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. Just so the petitioner knows that the time has elapsed for you to bring input to this decision this evening. So we are ready for action.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Any other options here? Is there some creative way to do this that we're not thinking of, that I'm not familiar with? I know we're looking at a use variance. Is there something else the petitioner could come back with that wouldn't require a use variance? Is any other options?
They can request a rezone from Plan Commission and Council.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, and use variances are, they are not in the new code. So this is the last use variance. The new code was adopted was signed by the mayor on Saturday. You have 2 use variances before you tonight. A use variance is a tool that we have used for a long time. It is becoming less and less common in planning because effectively you are, in some people think you are maybe spot zoning. It's becoming a little less common. So we did not take them forward into the new code. So if this use variance is denied, then the only option would be to request a rezone of their property.
And what rezoning, I mean, would you recommend to get what they want done?
They would have to request a rezone to a multifamily zoning district, and yeah, we would not support that either because the comprehensive plan doesn't support that. But that would be their other option.
So we're back to the board for action. They're really either we need to move on this and either approve it or deny it or continue it. Those are our choices.
With continuing it, isn't it the case that we can only speak about like crafting these findings here in this circumstance? But this is not something we can discuss later on, right? Or unless it's within the context of a meeting. That's not allowed. Am I correct?
Yeah, let me unmute Mike. Mike, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, what you might do, what I would suggest doing is asking staff to propose some findings that are consistent with what you're describing tonight. You guys wouldn't work on them outside of this meeting or discuss them outside of a BZA meeting. And then when you reconvene to discuss this petition or this use variance request after continuing it, if that's what you choose to do tonight, you would look at what staff had prepared as an alternative proposed set of findings. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And we can work on some things individually to bring to the next meeting.
And yes, right.
Of course, yes.
No more questions.
Well, Barry, I didn't mean to bring up a can of worms there. So
That's okay.
the idea there is that, first of all, this property is messed up. You know, having three houses there, and one of them would be landlocked if anyone decided to subdivide that. So there's a mess. The reality is the only thing that would really fix it is they would tear down all 3 structures and build a home, a single home. That's, to my understanding, that's the only thing to really bring that in code and let them do what they want to do.
Right.
So I want to be clear at this point before we do make a motion that what we're left with is this is a property that is the result of a series of decisions that were made by the homeowners of how they wanted to use their property. And throughout time, they've been able to do certain things like have a business, and then they have 3 single family residences on it. Now they're trying to move it to another use. And unfortunately, they've run up against new zoning that doesn't allow for that. So they were able to take advantage of zoning and making those changes in the past, but that's not the case now. So it's not that the city hasn't been agreeable to helping them use their property the way they wanted to use their property. It's just that now we're in a position that this property is no longer in a configuration that really allows them to do what they want them to do. So that's, if we're stuck with just this this request for a variance, I'm gonna vote to deny. If, however, we have a motion put forward that says, I'll vote that we continue this so that we can examine a different structure that that is more in lines with what you would find on a property with a single-use family home, then I would be willing to vote for that type of a motion.
But let me just clarify, Joe, we're not actually voting on the project. We're voting.
I know, we're not voting on the project.
So we have to put the cart before the horse, because if we feel that we want to entertain a potential use variance here, then we will craft what the conditions are that will define what their project can ultimately be.
Yeah, and I was saying that for sake that I don't have those conditions. I was just saying that, you know,
right,
in general, that I would agree with whatever form that petition, that motion takes and I understand that we're not voting on the design.
Yeah, they don't have an opportunity to propose another project at this point.
Yeah.
We have what we have before us, and if we want to allow or consider the use variance, the way to do that would be to continue the case so that we can craft conditions that we would feel comfortable with.
Understood.
Any other questions or thoughts? Did you make a motion?
I did not.
Nobody's made a motion.
No, because it's complicated.
Yeah.
So the motion would be to continue the case to the next hearing. That's the motion. That would be, I'm requesting that motion or a denial or
Or an approval.
approval.
I'll make a motion.
Please make a motion.
I'd like to move that we continue case UV-03-20 to the next meeting and I don't know how to proceed from here. Request that staff provide us with additional alternative findings based on our discussion here.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'm trying to unmute Flavia, but I don't know if it's working, and that's all I've got. No second, looks like.
No second. Okay, so the motion fails. Need another motion.
Flavia, you don't want to take this one?
No one wants to take this one.
All right. I'm going to motion that we deny UV-03-20.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay. Any last thoughts before we vote? If not, I call roll, please. So
Thank you.
voting yes is for denial.
Correct. Husky,
No.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Okay. The petition is denied.
Vote 3-1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I am recusing myself from this next case because Spring Point Architects is the architect on the project. So I hand the meeting over to Joe. And I'm going to say goodbye, right? Because I have to leave the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Clapper.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, thank you, Madam President. All right, let me get to that portion. All right, we will move forward to, make sure we got the right one here. Okay, the next petition is Bloomington Housing Authority at 502 West 2nd Street, Bloomington, Indiana. Case UV/V-09-20. May I have a staff report?
Yes, thank you very much. So the petitioner is Bloomington Housing Authority, and they are coming before the Board of Zoning Appeals tonight for a property that's at the southeast corner of West 14th Street and North Monroe. The property is zoned residential core, and the petitioners would like to redevelop this site to allow for a daycare center that would be on the ground floor of the proposed new building with 3 two-bedroom apartments on the upper floor. So they're requesting a use variance to allow for that daycare center and the multifamily residences And then also with that request is a variance from side yard parking setback standards. So real quick, I'll just kind of walk through the site. As I mentioned, this is at the southeast corner of 14th and Monroe. It's zoned residential core. Properties to the north, east, and south have all been developed as single-family residences. To the west of this is zoned residential high-density multifamily and has been developed with the Crestmont community. Just to the immediate north of this, you have Tri-North Middle School. Crestmont Park is also just to the north of this a little bit. A little bit further east, you have Mills Pool. So there's kind of a wide range of uses that surround this property. It's certainly at a very unique location on the outskirts of some of its neighbors. As you go a little bit further north on Monroe, 17th Street, and other commercial businesses are just immediately to the north of this. So as I mentioned, the property is zoned residential core. The comprehensive plan designates this as mixed urban residential. So it's a different comprehensive plan designation than the petition that you just heard. It's a little bit more unique. And as I mentioned, this property is unique, not just in its location, but also some of the use that has been on this site for the past several decades. This was a water tower for the utilities department that was just recently removed last year. So the utilities department still owns this site, and they will be leasing it to the housing authority for a long-term lease to develop it with this prospective site plan. So the site plan that they are proposing would feature a 2-story building up on the corner of the site. There would be one drive cut off of Monroe Street for 6 parking spaces. As I mentioned, the ground floor would be a daycare center with 3 2-bedroom apartments on the upper floor. So with a use variance request, the Board of Zoning Appeals, as well as as recommended in the staff report, must designate a zoning district to govern the development on the property. So the staff and the petitioner are utilizing the RM zoning district standards, which is kind of the lower density multifamily standard that would allow for these apartments. The density is within that 7 units per acre that's allowed. It comes in right about 6.2 dwelling units per acre. So they are providing 6 parking spaces on the site. These are only required for the residential uses. They're not required for the daycare. So the 6 spaces are being provided for each bedroom that is in the upper stairs apartments. So real quick, with this new development, the property would have to come into full compliance with the zoning code. That means sidewalk and street trees along 14th Street. There is a sidewalk on Monroe Street currently. However, the transportation plan calls out for a 10 or 12 foot multi-use path. So the sidewalk would need to be removed to allow for the installation of the multi-use path. There would be a tree plot installed along Monroe Street as well as landscaping throughout the site to meet all of our requirements. With the use on the site as multifamily and the use of the RM zoning district standards, and the adjacent properties being zoned RC. There is a buffer yard that is required along the south and the east property line. That buffer yard adds an additional setback requirement as well as an additional landscaping requirement. So the petitioners are able to meet the landscaping component to that buffer yard, but the additional 10-foot setback in addition to the base standard creates a difficulty for the parking area from the south property line. So they are requesting a variance from 17 feet that is required to allow for the 7 foot that is being proposed. So real quick, I'll just kind of walk through some of the elevations. This would be the south elevation. I'm sorry, this is the west elevation facing Monroe Street. The building would have a masonry base with fiber cement siding. The brick tower that you see on the right side of the screen is the stair tower that accesses the apartments that are on the 2nd floor. The front door that you see there, it's on the ground level for the main building, accesses the daycare center. So this was an elevation for the north side. This would be the side of the building facing 14th Street. This is an elevation facing east. So this is kind of the interior of the site. You can see the 2 entrances, both, again, those are for the daycare center. And then this is the south elevation. So this is facing the parking area. Monroe Street is on the left side of your screen. So they've got an entryway for the daycare, a couple doors, as well as another entry on the south side of the building. You can see the large brick stair tower that, as I mentioned, accesses just the apartments on the second floor. So we do have a floor plan for both the ground floor and the first floor. There would be just two classrooms on the ground floor, as well as a small kitchen and laundry area and office. The upstairs, as I mentioned, would have 3 2-bedroom apartments, a small kitchen and living area, and a bathroom. So with that, the Planning Commission did review this at their April 13th hearing. And found that the proposed use does not substantially interfere with the goals of the comprehensive plan. And they voted as 6-0 to forward this to you with a positive recommendation. And in our staff report, we outlined how the proposed use variance and development standards variance criteria are being met. Real briefly, the small size of this property combined with the low number of units and low bedroom count helps limit any negative impacts to adjacent properties. Some of the peculiar condition for this particular property is the history of non-residential use here, specifically the water tower, most recently by the Utilities Department for several decades. But also what's really unique here is the location of this site on the edge of the neighborhood, on a classified street, immediately adjacent to other higher density multifamily on the opposite side of the street. So the comprehensive plan encourages for this area, for the mixed urban residential area, the comprehensive plan encourages a diversity of land uses and density at appropriate locations. So this particular site at the perimeter of the neighborhood is certainly an appropriate location. It's not within a single family neighborhood. You've got a mix of uses around here. And in regards to the variance from the parking from the south, they will be installing the required landscaping and the fence to help provide visual buffering. And the small size of the parking area really also just helps kind of minimize any possible impacts to the adjacent property. So with that and with the finding of staff report, we are recommending that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings with just the 2 conditions that are listed in staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
At this time, I'd like to have the petitioner's representative, who is going to be representing tonight. Amber?
Yes. Hey, everyone. It's Amber Scobie. I'm the Executive Director of the Bloomington Housing Authority.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
You have 20 minutes to present your petition. Any unused time at this point will be saved for later during comments.
Okay. I just have a few brief remarks. Thank you, first of all, for considering our request. We're really excited about this project. It fulfills a mission at the Housing Authority for providing good quality of life for our residents. We've always wanted to provide more opportunities for daycare, and we're hoping to partner with Head Start to provide an early Head Start classrooms on the first floor, and that would serve a critical childcare gap in the community. It would serve up to 18 infants and toddlers, so 0 to 3 years old. And based on some recent resident statistics within our greater Crestmont community, we currently have about 65 children that would meet that age, and the only Head Start available is all the way in Ellettsville, and there's a very long wait list for that. So we look forward to partnering with the City of Bloomington Utilities. They've graciously offered to lease the land to us to do this project. And also we will be housing 3 families, most likely which would be considered low income in the 3 apartments on the second story. So again, this helps us meet a critical need in this community that has a significant child care gap, and it would be extremely affordable for both the child care and the rental opportunities. And with that, I'm hanging on in case I can answer any questions. But again, thank you for considering our request.
Thank you. At this point, it is to the board for questions, whether those questions are for the staff or for the petitioner. Okay, am I seeing no questions? Do we have anyone from the public who would like to make comment? Jackie, is there anyone on Facebook? Is there any Facebook questions?
Sorry, Joe, I keep muting myself. No, there's nobody. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no comments from the public, I will ask if there are any other board questions or procedural questions at this point. Okay. At this point, we can offer to the petitioner additional comments if you'd like to make them. Otherwise, we'll move forward for final comments and action by the board. Would you like to have any further comments?
No more comments. Thank you.
Very good. I will take it back to the board for action.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that we approve case UV/V-09-20 with the recommendations from staff.
Add as the following conditions. Add that.
With the following conditions. Number one, the multi-use path. Do we need to read the entire thing or just?
Please, yeah, just to put it in record.
Yeah, number one, a multi-use path is required along Monroe Street frontage. This must be shown on the grading plan. And number two, all variances for the submitted Bloomington Housing Authority are for the submitted Bloomington Housing Authority project only.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yes, you have a second.
Any further discussion? And with that, we'll call the roll.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes,
Husky.
Yes.
Motion
Motion passed 3-0.
Yep. Okay.
Great.
Is there any other business in front of the board this evening?
No.
Okay. Now, just to clarify for Flavia and Cassandra, how are we going about getting the signatures on both of these?
That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that yet, but I will keep you posted probably tomorrow.
Okay. So
You mean for the
public record-
findings?
Yeah, for the findings. So for the public record, Barry will sign for the first case and I'll sign for the second case. And
Correct.
with that, I call for adjournment.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.